Joining us now is a guy I met a couple weeks ago. Consider him a really good friend. More importantly, he's a really good guy. Lot of hero services, Kyle. Uh, you your work with in the medical field and EMT and all this other stuff really makes you valuable to your community, and I think valuable to what we're doing because you can bring to light some of the things that are needed by so many. So I'd like to introduce Kyle Goodknight um, of KyleGoodknight.com. Tell us a little bit about what you're trying to do, my friend.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Zach. So my name's Kyle Goodknight. I'm a first responder paramedic. I'm also a respiratory therapist. Was a therapist first, and then I went over into the first responder world about 20 years ago. Total of 26 plus years in the healthcare field and first responder stuff. So 20 of it is first responder. So what I'm actually doing is I've had an incident where I had my own PTSI. It was a blind side, I call it, because it was not expected, and I found myself in a rut. Right, I found myself in a spiral, and I was trained well enough with my mentors that I was able to raise my hand and say, "Hey, something's not right. I don't know what's wrong. I just know it's not right." Right? So
Right.
my mentor came to my home a day after my shift when all this stuff went down, and it wasn't just one thing. It was the same thing, but multiple times in a very short period of time, and she deemed me to like, "Hey, are you willing to go get some help?" And I said, "Absolutely." I was like, "Because I don't like feeling like this. I know it's gonna cause problems in more parts of my life and not just with my work." So I went and got some help, and got on the other side of it. And then I'm sitting there in a class one time, a big lecture. It was a seminar about EMS, and it's the same stuff up on stage. It's 12 leads, it's trauma care, it's difficulty breathing, the difficult airway. And I'm like, yeah, those are all great, and we train on that a lot. One thing we've never got training on is how to build and fortify ourselves. From the beginning of my career, and goes back into the schooling. I went to school back in 97, so that ages me. There was no training on the hospital side respiratory about resilience and how to package things properly when we see what we see. And in EMS, there wasn't any training back then for us ourselves. I ended up speaking to several people as I started to build this course, because when I was sitting in that classroom, I'm like, I need to build a course about us. Because I know we have a problem, we have a stigma, we have that inability to say, hey, I do feel a little wonky as a whole, as a first responder whole, and that includes firefighters, EMTs, police, emergency dispatchers, corrections officers, all those first responders, right? And I ended up talking to several during my research on this. I talked to one police officer who was like, I said, "Hey, how much training do you get in the academy?" He's like, 2 hours. I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. 2 hours a week. That's what you guys are doing now. That's great. You guys totally need that." He's like, "No." He's like, 2 hours for the entire time we talk about ourselves. And I'm like, "Oh, that's a problem. 2 hours isn't
Yeah.
enough. We know it takes anywhere between 66 days and 285 days, I think as the research said, to establish a habit. And to establish self-care and to establish resilience, you need to do it over time with someone who's been there and done that and can help you. So basically, that's what I'm doing. I've created a course. I've found some very good tools and knowledge and things that tie a lot together. That things that tied together for me, including before I became a medical professional, so like it goes back that far. And a lot of people don't understand that that's tied together. Our brain health, our communication with our family, whether that's you're married and have a wife and kids, or whether that's your parents when you're a young EMT or a young firefighter or police officer and you don't have a true family yet. You may only have your family as in your mom and dad and brothers and sisters or whatever your dynamic is. That is still important too, because if they don't understand your world, then that's a stressor, right? And of course, it's not all about the stress we see on scene. It's not all about that. It's the stress about your home life. You're away from your family for extended periods of time. And this is why it even goes into like the hospital realm. Hospital realm people, I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, sometimes 3 days in a row, sometimes over weekends where everything was going on with the rest of my family because they're not in healthcare, or most of them weren't in healthcare. My wife is. My wife's a nurse. So, I mean, that was a double whammy, right? So it was one of those things where it's not just what we see and what we deal with at the job. It's also what we deal with at home. I mean, the other day it snowed 8 inches in like an hour here where I live. And I wasn't there to help clear it all, and that doesn't feel great. I want to be there,
Yeah.
like my wife's out there with her broken finger trying to because the dog's broke her finger a couple weeks or a couple months ago and it's still healing. She's out there trying to move 8 inches of snow. That's not fun for her. I don't like that. My garage door, anytime it's ever anything, any problems that happened, and this is Murphy's / first responders law, if you will. If anything goes wrong, it's when you're on duty, right? Car broke down when she was 8 months pregnant. I couldn't get to her. I was in the middle of a shift, garage door bust. She can't get out of the garage to go to work and I can't, I'm not there to help lift it because it's a heavy, once that spring, everybody knows once the spring breaks, it's a very heavy door. But luckily, we have neighbors, thank God. But, that's all part of it. It's not just what we see on scene. It's how we bridge the gap and how we come back home and present ourselves too. If we present ourselves under that same stress that we were just in, then that's not good for our kids, our parents, our wives, our husbands, our significant others, whatever you want to call, who you have at home, who you come home to, your own dogs. If you live by yourself as a first responder and you come home to your dogs, and maybe that's a little caveat because dogs always make me happy no matter what, and unless they've got diarrhea or sick, then I'm really cranky.
Yeah. I got one right now that was pushing up my elbow just a second ago. I kind of look like
I'm surprised mine haven't come and showed their faces. I got big
Yeah.
dog. I got 5 dogs. So
real quick question for you. First off, I want to kind of remind people out there that one of the things that you as EMS has to deal with every day, as just a normal citizen, how aggravating it is when other people are driving. Imagine having to get to a place very quickly, and not because you're running late, because someone's life is in danger,
right.
with the way that these other people drive. Okay,
Yeah.
so that would be one thing. Kyle, please explain to me the difference between PTSD and PTSI.
So how I understand it, and this is the PTSI is a newer term they're starting to use, and even we unfortunately lost a firefighter out in the California area in the beginning of February. And I say we, I mean first responder world. And they put on the public announcement that he succumbed to his struggles with PTSI. So people are starting to use the I, and the I stands for injury or incident. So D is a disorder. I believe when it comes to the disorder, it's a long-term process that takes that is it is a true known disorder. Read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and they talk, very, very deeply about, everything that goes into the disorder of, post-traumatic stress. Where the PTSI comes in is an injury, an incident, something that happens that it affects you in a way, just that single incident affects you in a way that you feel the same the same feelings that eventual PTSD people have, but you feel it more abruptly and more acutely, if you will. So, and then, all PTSIs can go into PTSD. Now, the nice thing is if we know that there's PTSI, okay, I just had an incident that I don't feel right. 2 weeks afterwards, and I'm talking like when it comes to time frame, not the day of. A lot of times we can package things well in the first day or two, and then like a week later, something reminds you, and you get the shake. Have you ever got the shake? Anybody's ever got the shake? You think of something because our mind is very powerful. I chop my fingers off on the top of my finger off on a table saw, and once in a while, I'll think of that moment when my finger hit the blade and I shake and that's a PTSI, right? Now I can move on. Right? Literally, I'm not not worried about it now. I'm not dreading on it now. But it's those PTSIs are those little incidences that give you the shake, that give you that weird feeling, that if you can start to understand that that's what that is, you can package it properly. And I'm not saying like, okay, every incident you need to dive deep into therapy. And in even the word therapy anymore, there's so many new things you can do that doesn't involve the word therapy that people don't understand. And that's another thing that I'm bringing to my course is it's not about talk therapy all the time, right? It's about things that you can do for yourself, the mindset, the self-care, the mindfulness and thinking, and how you perceive things. So and then if it gets to the point where you need some form of guidance, there's like I said, it's hard not to say the word therapy, but there's EDMR, there's hypnotherapy, there's all kinds of stuff out there that are proven to make a difference and even destroy years and years and years of trauma of any sort. Right now, is it overnight? No, just like it's not overnight that you have a PTSD situation. So my PTSI was, I didn't even realize that it was something that stemmed from my youth until about 3 months ago. And we're sitting in, if this is evergreen, we're sitting to February 21st of 2024. My incident that sent me for a loop was 5 years ago. And through the process of dealing with that, I came out on the other side feeling great about things and understanding and packaging it properly. I can go on calls now that are similar to the one that happened with me, multiple ones that happened to me in a row, and it was, and my coworkers know that this type of run, they need to check in with me if we go on that kind of run again, because when in EMS we never know where we're going to get. I mean, hell, I delivered my first baby in 25 years a month ago. You just never know what you're going to get, right? So it's one of those things where the communication, the stripping away the stigma. I think if there's one major message, is that stigma that surrounds us as first responders, that we have to be tough and that we train for this. That's the double-edged sword, or that's the conundrum. A lot of people think that we trained for this. We trained to be able to see the hard stuff. We trained to how to fix it or how to deal with it in the moment. We didn't train for the aftermath. We are starting to, as a whole. I did talk to a couple of EMS class people that run paramedic programs, and I asked them straight up, hey, do you do anything about mental health for the person? Like, not mental health runs where we go and we deal with the mental health patient, but for us. And he said, we're starting to sprinkle it in, because COVID kind of helped that, which is great. A couple of good things that came out of COVID and the shutdowns and the mental health strain that COVID caused. It brought a lot of that up to the light, and people are a little bit more open about it. The stigmas aren't completely stripped, but they're peeling away, right? So if there's, that my course, the first thing we talk about, no matter what, we have to make sure that you come in with a completely open mind and that you have zero stigma towards what you're trying to fix yourself or fix. If it's a loved one that comes into my course, that they're trying to make sure that they don't have a stigma of their loved one that puts them without being able to communicate, issues. So.
One of the things that, while you were sitting there talking, one of the things that I remember, one of the that I have with post-traumatic is I slipped on ice, and my foot hit our stone house, and it completely detached my ankle from my leg. And I remember the EMT coming to take me in, and I made a little bit of a sound when I went to go try to move or something like that, and the guy goes, "It's okay if you holler. I mean, that looks like it hurts." And I'm like, "Yeah, but is it really going to do me any good?" And he goes, "It probably make you, probably make you feel a little bit better." And I'm like, "Yeah, I doubt that very seriously, but I love." I knew what it would do is it would just, bring more attention. But
Right.
that was a fun time. I couldn't imagine what they thought of when they first walked into the yard, though, because it was the middle of winter. Obviously, there was ice on the ground. You don't get a lot of ice on the ground in the middle of summer. So, hi, go. now, please. But my dad came out of the house and threw a cover over me. So these EMS guys come walking up. There's a covered up body on the ground, you know. So I couldn't imagine what they were thinking. It's like going, wait, I thought we were here for a leg
For a
injury.
broken leg, yeah, exactly.
Instead. So,
Yeah.
but let me ask you this: your wife, yourself, working in this, do you two often talk to each other about stressors, or is it better for the relationship and for yourselves to talk to someone else and not, because I could see how, you know, you've got that old saying, leave work at work, leave home at home. And look, that's impossible for anyone. That's
Yeah,
just that's
that
that's the
yeah.
way it is. It's impossible for anyone. But I would imagine it would really be difficult to do that if you two would, like, really need to talk to each other about that,
Right.
to a point. So how do you two manage that?
Well, you know, we didn't manage it for a while, and that's why we faced divorce at one point in time in our marriage. About 12 years in, I came home from a shift, and she's like, "Hey, I'm done," and I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm moving out," and I'm like, "Wait, whoa, what? Hold on." So it was one of those things where that was through unpackaging all of that, we spent 2 years unpackaging and reconciling our marriage, which was fine. Out of 24 years so far, 2 years is a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally happy, that my kids got to grow up in a, because they were younger then. They were probably 9 and 6, 5 and 8, right around there. So they got to grow up in their informative years with a combined household and not split up. So that was nice, and that was one focus that her and I had. But what we found during that process was that we were in a crazy cycle. And the crazy cycle comes from the book, Love and Respect. And what it is, hey, I'm not showing you love, so therefore you're not going to show me love. Or I'm not showing you respect, so therefore I'm not showing you respect. And that comes with, not talking about our jobs, not communicating. So another big part of what I talk to people about is communication. Communication in general can open up a lot of doors. You don't have to go into detail. You don't, like HIPAA rules. We're really not allowed to go into detail. We can do some generalities. There's plenty of people that I've seen be like, "Hey, I saw your wife the other day." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, where'd you see her? Store?" And like, "No, I was in the doctor's office. She didn't tell you?" I'm like, "Oh, hell no." She don't tell me she sees anybody we know. Like, that's not allowed. She can get fired for that. Like, I'm like, now that you told me that you go to her practice, I still can't even go back and ask her about what you guys discussed, right? I can just, "Hey, oh, by the way, I heard that blah, blah, blah goes to your practice now." And she goes, "Oh,
Hey,
that's nice."
Lloyd just
She
told
doesn't
me
even
about
agree.
his warts. What did you see?
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, even when I'm like, "Oh, by the way, I bumped," and we're talking about neighbors. I mean, I've got neighbors come up to me years later and be like, "Oh yeah, well, I saw Jen today. She was busybody all around the office." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. You must go to her practice." "Yeah, you didn't know that?" I'm like, "Yep." And then even when I go back and talk to her, I'm like, "Oh, I found out that, this neighbor goes to your office now." She's like, "Okay, that's nice." And she does it, like, it's like she shuts it down. It's so nice, right? But when it comes to what we see at work and what we deal with at work, because she's a pediatric nurse, and there's parents just, I'm telling you right now, it's not the pediatrics that's the problem. It's some of the parents, right? Just like
Mm-hmm.
typical, like when dogs are a basket case, it's their handler, right? Their handler
Yeah.
doesn't know how to control the dog. So, but she has a high stress environment as well, and we are now, the communication has been fixed. We've done it with our kids. We don't sugarcoat anything with our kids, at age appropriately, mind you. You don't come home and talk about the crazy stuff sometimes. But hey, by the way, dad had a pretty rough night last night. We had a pretty important call, and just, if I feel a little off today, just, that's what it is. I'm going to do my best to try to get myself in the present to make sure that I'm here for you as well, and I'm not distant. So communication is really the key. And yes, we do share with one another our struggles at work. Now, we get to the point where we're trying, I do my best not to try to get it's something that is stressful to me and is not, and it got me into a fit of discomfort or anger at work, I try not to get back into that anger at home when I'm telling her what my day was like. And that's the important thing. And we do listen to each other. We do give support to one another, and it's better now, of course, than it's ever been, because we've just got so much practice at it, right? And it's not perfect when you first start out trying to communicate your outside of the home world with your loved ones, but it's just a matter of appropriately and legally being able to explain what you have gone through, and that why you may feel a little off today, and things, hey, what makes me feel good is to sit down and build Legos with you, buddy. If I come home and I'm like, hey bud, I know you said earlier that you like to build Legos with me. Let's go ahead and build some Legos for a couple of minutes, and just let's do something together, so I can get away from what I dealt with yesterday at work, and I can focus on you. So communication, I think, is honestly the bottom line of what we need to do when it comes to our loved ones and our jobs. And that can be tough. Sometimes people don't want to hear it, and that can be something where a third party person, not a counselor, a moderator of some sort, somebody who is trained to unpackage. That's one thing that when we went through our couples therapy, we were able, our third party person wasn't like a shrink. He was more of a moderator, right? He was a counselor. And what he was able to do was, like, the words that came out of my mouth that she didn't understand, he was able to, like, say, hey, what he really means in guy talk, and for you to understand, is this. And that's one thing we learned during that process, is that she communicates a little bit differently than I do, and how to unpackage what I'm communicating, right? So
that would be, those moderators, they've got to have nerves of steel, because you gotta go to that point where I'm not trying to mansplain something to you,
right,
but what and I see a lot of times that there are conversations that you're in an argument with somebody where two people are saying the exact same thing, but they're saying it different, and it comes across as you're arguing, and it's like, we're not arguing, we're saying the exact same damn thing.
Yeah.
Look, I just say it this way, you say it
Right.
that way, but it means the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this, because this is one of the things, and see, I wrote this down, and like we were talking about earlier, if I write it down, I'm going to see it after we're done, and I'm going to be like, going, we didn't even get a chance to ask that. So what are the difference between what are the stressors difference between an EMS and respiratory therapy? Because
that's a good therapy. One. Oh my gosh, that's a great one. So respiratory therapy, if people don't know what that is, we're the ones that deal with the ventilators and breathing treatments. Mm-hmm. And we're basically, the easiest way to say it, to understand it, is we're a nurse specifically for the respiratory system, airway and lungs. We do have some cardiopulmonary departments that sometimes we do some cardio stuff, and they're combined. But I worked at 3 different level 1 trauma centers. You see all kinds of stuff come into level 1 trauma centers. One of them was a pediatric level 1 as well. So I saw some crazy stuff, kids being burnt, dipped in water, blah, all that kind of stuff. I've seen some wonky stuff. And I think the difference where the stressors are there is you don't really have any downtime. You just have to go to the next patient. And there's also the fact that most hospitals help more people than they don't, right? More people survive their stay at the hospital than die at a hospital. A lot of people think, well, I don't want to go to the hospital. People die there. Well, people die on our roadways way more than our hospital systems. But when it comes to the stress between the two, when we're done with a run, sometimes we don't ever find out anything about what happened to that person. We're lucky enough now, my department now will have a digital format for our charting, and I can click a button that says follow up, and we have a team that follows up. We have different people for each hospital in our local area that have connections to get in HIPAA permitted, to get the information after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, ever long it takes to get the diagnosis from them of what happened with that person, and we get follow up. We get closure, right, with that. And I think that's a big thing, where for a lot of times people that don't have the closure, the wondering if what I did helped, or if it didn't help, what could I have done differently, and then critique my care, right? So respiratory wise, it's high stress, and the fact that there's, I've had 5 ventilators one time in a 12-hour shift that came into the ER, and 3 of those were overdoses that were dropped off on our front porch, right? You're like, whoa, that's a stressful situation.
Yeah.
That was also for me a very adrenaline rush for me. And it was stressful in the moment, but I knew that I was doing everything in every single moment to help that person survive. And that is helpful, right? So then I see that person walk out of the hospital later on that day, or 2 weeks from then, if they get put in the ICU, or traumas that come in, and I see them, after surgery, because with respiratory, we kind of float the hospital. We're not always in the ER, or we cover the floors, we cover ICUs, and we rotate. So there's times when you see, and you have the ability in the hospital to walk up and see how a patient was doing that you came into the ER. So there's a lot more closure, and a lot more, you see a lot of the things that happen on the backside where they survive or they get better, and that feels good. And you don't have those same stressors that were crazy in the moment. You see things. I mean, I've had a patient where he dove into a pool, broke his neck. Well, I became pretty close to him in the ICU setting because I cared for him for weeks. And after that was all said and done, him and his family, because we got to be so close, they invited me over for a visit at their home to see his home life now that was changed. And he was an ex Big Ten football player, right? And it was one of those things where, I got to see how he, unfortunately, yes, he is paralyzed, but he is living a life, and his brain is still intact, and he is still able to have a conversation. And I got to see that. So that the stressors of his injury that were on me during that time, they're not there, because I know that he got to the backside of it with some form of life, right? And that's very helpful. So it is a big difference between the respiratory stress and the EMS stress. Sometimes with the EMS stress, there's things, because I personally, and a lot of us, I would think, a lot of first responders, they operate in the community that they live in, or they're close to, or they
Yeah.
get close to. My specific PTSI, it affected my whole family. The person I was unable to help because they were already gone was actually a friend of my daughter. And when I came home, she was crying, and I'm like, "What's going on, babe?" And she's like, "My friend just died, and somebody I go to school with." And I'm like, "Oh my God." And she looked on my face and knew that I was on that run, because she put 2 and 2 together, that we live really close to where her friend lives, and that I was at work, and then I just came home. And she was like, "Oh my God, you were on that." And I'm like, "Yeah, but babe, I was." And, why couldn't you help her, Dad? I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, sorry, but,
No,
that's one of
no.
those things that, here's where it kind of creeps up sometimes. It's like, I couldn't help her friend. They were already gone. There was nothing I could do, nothing my team could do. And that hurts, because it's one of those things where you don't want your daughter to look at you like you were supposed to do a job, Dad, and you couldn't do it. Well, unfortunately, they were already 2 gone before I got there. But yeah, that was the beginning. And then I had multiple runs after that were the same concept, the same situation. And it was like, that was a big one, because it wasn't just the girl, it was her whole family. And mom and dad and brother as well. So it was devastating to the community. It was devastating to myself. It was devastating to my crew. I ended up, one of my groomsmen was best friends with the dad back in high school and early college. There was just too many connections, right?
Too many connections. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a rough one, right? And then a month later, we had 9 of these runs in a row. And and it was like, what is going on? And it was like, okay, hold on a second. There is something not right here with me internally. And it was, and luckily, like I said, I raised my hand and got some help, and I'm on the backside of it now. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, yes, you saw me get emotional because, the family factor came into it, and I still think of it once in a while, but it's packaged better. it's not packaged in a way that brings me stress. It brings me understanding, and it's been put in a place where if it does creep up, or if I ever go on a run like that again, which I have, I'm in a better place to know that it's not going to affect me the same way, because I went to my tool bag. I've figured out what tool needs to be to fix it. And then if I ever get back to that case, I know where that tool is. Just like I carry a first in bag. I know exactly where my ambu bag is to breathe for someone is. That's the same concept that I'm teaching when it comes to my course, is that I want people to have a mental first in bag when they need help, or they don't feel right, or they've built these tools, they've packaged them properly, and they know where to go in the bag to grab the tool that could help them with that. And if that tool doesn't work, what's the next tool? Well, there's plenty of tools out there now. It's not just one-stop shop. There are plenty of tools in the toolbox to help us to package things properly.
Kyle, I want to thank you so very much, and just to let you know, I please send your wife my love, my respect.
I will do.
When you got emotional just a minute ago, and when you told me about how the parents are one of the worst part, you're right. I remember my son being 2 years old, and we had to rush him in because his oxygen level was really, really low.
Yeah.
And they couldn't draw blood from my son. They kept missing. And I remember telling that nurse, and I mean, I apologized to her up and down that night, but I mean, still, I remember looking at her, telling her, you know what, if you stab him one more time and don't get it, I'm going to stab you. I was, my son just looked up at me and goes, Daddy, she's hurting me. And I'm like, you're sitting there and like tears running down my face. Yeah, your kid's saying,
and that's a PTSI right there. You don't want your kid to get hurt. I mean, if we had all the time in the world, my daughter got put in the ICU and went on ventilator support because I didn't make the decision properly to get her help early enough. There's that one. That messed me up, because it was like, wait a second, I didn't make a decision, and I'm a paramedic. I should have seen this coming, and unfortunately, I didn't.
There's nothing in this world that'll make your life change worse or more than your kids.
Oh, no doubt.
Decision that you made on your kids. So,
yep, exactly.
Hey, I want to thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I do want to mention this. I'm sure that people are watching this. You see my email address and whatnot, but I'm also putting on a free webinar on March 1st. And I can give Zach here the link that people can go and find that webinar and sign up for it. Come to get to know me a little bit more. I have a couple of things that can help you in the moment during that webinar. It's not the full course, of course not. Remember, we talked about 66 to 285 days, but it is definitely something where I want to make sure that anybody watching this, whether you're a first responder, a family member of a first responder, in nursing, hospital work, any type of high stress situation, I really feel as I was building this, that this could actually extend out to anybody in high stress. A lot of the same concepts are anything with high stress, not just first responder and what we see. So, because we know that there's heck, one of the most stressful jobs I ever had was when I was in the corporate world, and developing medical products. That was a very high stress job for some reason. And I'm like, nope, I want to go back to clinical. And if I have to pump on someone's chest, that's a lot less stressful than this world of corporate and all the things that happen in the corporate world. So if anybody's in the corporate world, they know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so
send me that information and we'll flash it.
Yeah, it'll be on my website too. He's put my website up there a couple of different times. My email, if that's something that interests you and you want to be a part of it, there's, I'm the only Kyle Goodknight in the world spelled the way that I spell it. I put a K in the middle of my last name, good knight in shining armor, if you will. I also purchased Goodknight without the K just on my website, just so if anybody forgets to put the K in, they still get me. So it's there is one other Kyle Goodknight in the world that is spelled without the K, and I've met him and I've talked to him on Facebook a couple times through chat, but that was pretty interesting. But yeah.
All right, my friend. Well, you know what? Hey, everybody, just remember that QR code above Kyle's head. That is a place where you can go and you can donate right now to help people who go through something similar to what Kyle's going through. we're going to be working with Kyle much more here in the near future, and be able to take and strengthen what he's got going on. And who knows, maybe next year he will be sitting in the same position as one of our benefactors next year. Kyle, I want to thank you very much. Please keep up the great work. I know that those 36-hour shifts have got to be a pain, but you know what? You're doing wonderful things.
Yep, it's my purpose. So, that's another reason why I need to package things properly. Is this is what I was put on this earth to do, and I learned that back when I saved my mother's life back in 2000. So, that's when I figured it out.
Thank you. All the love in the world to you and your team.
Appreciate it.
And please take care of yourself and everyone around you. But thank you very much, Kyle, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks.